I'm Ceara with Dallas Weekly. We've been kind of upping our political coverage, obviously, as we've had a lot of Texans get in the spotlight lately, most recently yourself. And I just had a couple of questions for you kind of about redistricting, how this might affect your campaign, the map, Black power and voting power, and also Black men specifically in voting power. And then kind of just want to wrap it with, like, if you have any notes of, I guess, positivity in these very tumultuous times. But if at any point you're like, you need some extra time, just let me know. Completely, we're taking this at your pace. So,
absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I'll go ahead and get started. First up, if the battle over this map ends up going to court, how do you think the Democratic Party will fight it? And do you think they have a strong chance of winning?
Well, I think that the party is going to put all the resources possible to go and fight this map. It's absolutely absurd. I mean, it's a affront to the Voting Rights Act, and I think we all, see that. The reality is, though, nowadays, is that Republicans don't play by the rules of law. They actively are doing everything they can to subvert that. I think that the real way forward is more political. I think that we've got to be calling on blue states to fight fire with fire. Like what California did today, I'm really excited about what Gavin Newsom has done there. Isaac Bryan, my majority leader of the California State House, somebody who I'm friends with and talked a lot about this issue with, they did a really good job. And I think the call now remains on us with a national platform to call on other blue states to follow. So we've got to be able to see work in New York. We've got to see work in Illinois. We've got to see work in Washington, Colorado. All these other places, I think we have to be able to go forward and gerrymander out Republicans without mercy, because ultimately it is blue states that hold the population advantage. And when we do that, we put ourselves in a much stronger position. So I think that the way forward is more political, and we've got to be able to go do that on a national level.
Awesome. Yeah, that would lead me kind of into my next question of, Texas is basically trying to dilute Black voting power through this redistricting. And so would you say this would maybe kind of even make, Democrats force us to build coalitions across racial lines, if that could work? How would you reassure in that case, if we are having, multi-racial groups in our effort, how would you assure Black voters that their agenda won't get lost in all of this?
I think that's why it's so important for us to turn out in record numbers in primary elections. I know, for example, in Houston, what was once the 18th, 29th, and 9th has now been basically combined into 2 congressional districts. So as a result of that, you now see Acres Home, which is a historically Black neighborhood in the 18th, birthplace of Sylvester Turner, now taken completely out and put with the 29th congressional district. Right, so we have always, because I was a senior advisor for Congresswoman Jackson Lee, Acres Home was always an 18th congressional district thing. It was something that we always, had similar interests and similar concerns, and now that's going to be lumped in with 29. So that certainly was intentional. They did this on purpose, but I think that's why now more than ever, in order to make sure that our priorities are coming to the forefront, we got to make these primary elections where our voices are heard, make sure that we are raising these issues, make sure we're holding people accountable. But again, I do think that more coalitions are going to have to be built, and that's why, I've always made a big emphasis on building a Big Tent, talk to as many folks as possible, building those coalitions to make sure we can get that done.
Awesome. Wonderful. I'm glad you took that turn. I wanted to ask you now about your campaign and your values, if you would just take a small moment to share a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Well, I'm running for Congress to bring a spine to the Democratic Party because, frankly, I don't think that we have that right now. I think we got to be a lot stronger against these Republicans. I mean, they're literally sitting there with flamethrowers, and our response is to sit back with super soakers. So I am of the opinion that we need to fight fire with fire. I love what Gavin Newsom is doing. We got to bring that same energy with everything we do. So it's not just with gerrymandering, but also about talking about affordability. And so I believe that going into this next midterms, we got to be talking about guaranteeing health care, guaranteeing child care. Why? Because that makes more people have more of their own money that they can use on their families and stuff like that. I'm also somebody that's a big proponent on getting rid of the tariffs, the Axe the Trump tax, because the tariffs are making life way too unaffordable for people in the 18th congressional district and everywhere else. And so, throughout my life, I've always just been focused on issuing and bringing up the concerns that people care about. It's what Congresswoman Jackson Lee taught me when I was her senior advisor. It's what I'll bring whenever I'm in Congress.
Wonderful. I want to go back really quickly to talking about districts. So Jasmine Crockett, as it is now, is effectively not going to be in her district anymore. Is this going to be the case for you as well? Have you been redrawn out of your district?
Yeah, that'll be for the next midterm, per se, or for the March primary. But for right now, I'm really focused on this current election that we have in November and December. That will be under the current lines that we have right now. And, look, after that election, we'll then have to go to a new district and meet a whole new group of folks. But, ultimately, I'm really focused on getting to Congress to represent the 18th that Sylvester Turner had previously served.
Wonderful. I want to talk now about black men in the Democratic Party. Do you think black men are leaving the Democratic Party, and how do we address this exodus? Is there a plan to get them to kind of come back?
Well, I would say that, black men still voted at one of the highest rates for Kamala Harris and Democrats this last election, right? So I think a lot of that stuff has been a bunch of right-wing grift, if I'm just being honest. But ultimately, I think what is true is that we do need to go and make sure that our outreach is where it needs to be. That's why I've always prioritized, like, my nightly TikTok town halls, in which I allow anybody to come up and ask me a question. Because I think that people are craving accountability. They want somebody that they don't just watch on television, that they just go and see, make a tweet here or there. I'm someone that they can say, look, we know every single night at 11 o'clock Central, Isaiah Martin is going to be on live, and we can go in and ask him about anything, a platform, what I want to do, and whatever. And as a result, that's why we get 15,000 people a night. I mean, it's almost like filling up American Airlines Center or Toyota Center every single night just to talk about the issues of today. And I think my authentic, just being very unapologetic myself is what has allowed me to get so much traction. I mean, our campaign is not funded by the richest folks in town. It's funded by people giving an average of $19 a person, many of which are black men from all ages. And so, look, I look forward to just continue to focus on our issues. Black men care about affordability. Black men care about the fact that their health care is completely unaffordable. Black men care about the fact that they have to pay basically the cost of rent to send their kids to child care. It makes no sense. And so I'm running to be on their side to make sure they can save more of their own money.
Wonderful. I want to go back to your TikTok town halls. Speaking about social media being such a powerful force in elections since, the 2010s, do you think this is still an effective political echo chamber as opposed to college campuses or other areas where we can exchange ideas and have a platform? Or do you think it's becoming oversaturated with voices of, Joe Rogans and podcasters and right-wing, all that craziness? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, absolutely not. I mean, I know for me, I can speak from experience. The fact that I can fill basically an NBA arena just to talk about politics, on TikTok Live whenever I want is crazy. Nobody else can do that. It's not even remotely close. I think that is why we have to be able to go and scale this up as big as possible. We've been able to build such a big network of folks on Instagram and Twitter and Threads, all of these different things. Just last week, we got more than, I think, 12 or 13 million views alone just on our content. That's absurd. And so, again, we're using this not just to say, look, here's us on social media, but turning that into volunteers. We have the biggest block walks every single week, the biggest phone base every single week. And we're also using that to drive people to go and chip into our campaign. That's why, I would never be able to run for Congress if it wasn't for social media, because I wouldn't be able to go keep up with the big money interest groups that want so hard to buy up politicians like NASCAR stickers. I would never be able to do that. But it's because of the fact that I've been able to put myself out there, be unaccountable to the big interest groups or whatever, and talk directly to people, that people believe in me enough to have more than 30,000 donors, again, at an average of $19 a person. It's crazy.
Wow. Incredible. Great work. As I'm wrapping it up here, I'm going to ask now if you have any words of encouragement in a season of such negativity and political turmoil. What keeps you going? What gives you hope? Are you optimistic about the future, and why? All that good stuff.
I am, actually. I'm a big reader of history, and, I remember reading about 1928, which was effectively this time in which Herbert Hoover won the presidency, big margins in the Senate, big margins in the House, and everybody thought they were unstoppable. They did all these ridiculous policies like the tariffs, like you see today. They did Mexican repatriation, which effectively allowed them to deport 4 million Mexican-American citizens. They did all these things, right? And ultimately, they ended up crashing the economy. But what came out of that was a bold Democratic Party. What came out of that was Franklin Roosevelt, which then ushered a new era of Democratic dominance, which gave us Social Security, which gave us access to some of the work programs that we have, union protection, so much to go and stabilize the economy. It's what led eventually to a reign of dominance that created JFK, and then the same thing with LBJ, which gave us a voting in the Civil Rights Act. So ultimately, through every rough patch in history will always be a time to be shining a lot brighter and greater than what we are. So I think about those times, and it's what really makes me believe even further that this party and the Democratic Party has to be bold. We have to be bold because right now, the same old politics, the same old status quo, the same old belief in strongly worded letters is not going to get us anywhere. We've got to be giving people a real reason to vote. It starts by affordability. It starts by making sure people have more of their own money with guaranteed health care and child care, and being relentless in every opportunity to get that done.
Oh, wonderful. That concludes all my questions for you. By the way, I want to mention those questions were drafted in part with Word and Black. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but they are a media collaborative featuring a lot of Black-owned and operated news publications across the country, of which Dallas Weekly is a part of. So I just had to shout them out really quickly. So thank them for some of those questions. But before I leave, is there anything else you would like to share with the readers of Dallas Weekly before I let you go today?
Absolutely. If anybody wants to check out our campaign, they can go to IsaiahMartin.org, IsaiahMartin.org. They can go in, they can chip in, sign up to volunteer. Everything's there.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Isaiah Martin, so much for your time today. Safe travels across the Metroplex, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right, bye.